Madam Brown, I'm the Water Resources Manager, Georgetown Public Utility District. And I thank you all for coming out tonight to listen to a rate study prepared for our main trail. Purpose of the meeting is to present the rate study, present how we came to those numbers, and what goes into developing the rate study. So the purpose of the meeting is for us, to do that, and really just comments, questions, more questions that you would have. And I think the best way to move forward with that is kind of towards the end after we get through our presentation. And the consultant that worked on the rate study for us is Catherine Hansford of Hansford Consulting. So she'll be going through the presentation. That's kind of what how we see this public presentation going today, this evening. And before we get started, Steve wants to say a few words to General Manager, and we'll move on to Catherine's presentation.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, I just want to say something really quick. I just want to be brief and put you guys back in Adam and Catherine's capable hands. So again, echo Adam's comments and thank you all for coming out tonight. I know the weather's kind of rough, so I really appreciate everyone coming out and getting wet. The only thing I wanted just to let kind of everyone know, there are some board members here in the audience listening, but this is not a board meeting. So I've asked them to hold their comments and their deliberation, their discussion for the board meeting, which is what's appropriate. This is really meant for staff here, Adam and Catherine, to be able to share with you folks how they went into the rate study calculation and what the rate study calculation tell us, and to listen to any comments that you might have. And then this will come back to the board for a formal board action, and that's the appropriate time for board members to have deliberations and discussions and let you know their thoughts on it. So we welcome your opinions and thoughts on it, but when it comes to the board discussion and interacting with the board, that's going to happen at a separate meeting. So with that, I think I'm going to hand over to Catherine now, and she's got a presentation to go through.
Can you do that?
This evening, can you all hear me okay? Good. All right, well, the district hired me in the fall last year to perform a rate study and, importantly, to a cost of service study. So I'll explain what that is. And this is specific to the ALT wastewater system. I am not looking at any other portion of the utility or the district. It is only for this system. And everything that pertains to the system and the permit under which this is all operated. I'm Catherine Hansford, and I'm the principal of Hansford Consulting, and I've come to see you from front. Okay. These are the objectives of the rate study. First, to provide a full and equitable cost recovery for wastewater services that are provided in ALT. Second, to educate the property owners on the types of services that are received and the costs of those services. To provide a robust financial analysis from which the district can make decisions. This report, what I produce for the district, is not necessarily the end product. I'm producing work that's based on data, it provides recommendations. Ultimately, it is the district's board decision as to what gets adopted. And all of this has to be in accordance with applicable California state laws and codes, which can be onerous. Okay. ALT wastewater has 3 different types of fees. Legally, there are 3 different types of fees. The first one, with which you will be very familiar with, is what we call property-related fees. That's what you receive bi-monthly bill, invoice for, and those fees are adopted pursuant to what's called Proposition 218. So we have to adhere to Proposition 218 for those fees. Then there are user fees. These are, you could think of them as one-time fees. These are adopted pursuant to Proposition 26. And these are for services that are provided by the district staff. Investigations, inspections, design review services, and generally maintaining compliance with the state code. You got here?
Yeah, can we turn it up a little bit, please?
I will try.
Okay.
I don't think I can turn it up on here. Can I speak louder? Okay, let's try that. Okay. Yes. Oh, sure. I just didn't want to block anybody's view, so let's. All right. Okay. Well, let me know if I get it. And then the third type of fee, this only actually applies to the CDS system, and there are only 2 lots left, so there are only 2 property owners that would pay this fee. This is called a connection fee, and that is to pay for their share of the cost of the CDS infrastructure that was put in place and that they are benefiting from by developing their property. And that fee is adopted pursuant to the mitigation fee. So three different legal fees. Most of this presentation is about the property-related fees. So best practices for fee setting is to review where the fees and charges are about every 3 to 5 years. You kind of think of it as a cycle. First of all, you are looking to see how well that revenue stream is coming in to cover your costs. Is it meeting what you had projected 3 to 5 years ago? Is it not? Have new projects come up or new needs come up that you hadn't anticipated 3 to 5 years ago that now you need to take care of? So start out by looking at the financials. That's the top there. It says determine revenue requirement. That's what it means. Then you want to select a fee structure. So making sure that you are collecting the fee in the most equitable way that you would, what the district thinks is the most equitable way. And there will be a basis for that. Then calculate what the fee amounts should be, implement them, and then again, review on this cycle. So that's best practices. For ALT, the overarching goal of all of this is to ensure that there is compliance with state permit order. Read out that number. So need to adequately fund the provision of service to ALT and maintain a prudent reserve. For the CDS system, to provide timely maintenance of the existing assets for as long as possible and collect sufficient revenues for future system rehabilitation costs so that the district's not in a position where they have to go out and find, borrow money on an emergency basis and pay high financing charges for that. The ALT Wastewater Fund is accounted for with 3 different funds. Fund 40 is unrestricted. Unrestricted means that the money can be used for any purpose within ALT, for wastewater services. And so that can be for both CDS system and non-CDS lots, properties. Fund 41 is a restricted fund. That was set up, and I don't know what the date was, but it was set up for the CDS loan program that was put into place to help homeowners pay for their share of costs I think it was mostly for replacing tanks. Yeah. And Fund 42 is also restricted, and that is for the CDS system reserves. Reason being that the CDS system actually has physical infrastructure that belongs to the district, whereas the non-CDS system does not. This table here shows the amount of cash in each of those funds as of June 30th, 2018. So a fiscal year for the district runs from July 1 through June 30th. That's why we're starting with that date. So you can see total unrestricted cash is about $955,000 and restricted cash of about $209,000. So the district had me conduct the rate study in the fall, and we took the preliminary findings to the finance committee so we could discuss what we were finding. And one of the key things that came up in that discussion was, well, we say we need reserves, but how much are we talking about? And what is really a prudent reserve? Well, it's a sufficient cash balance to be able to serve cash flow needs, to pay for emergency and unplanned necessary repairs, also to accumulate for system rehabilitation. That means planned improvements in time. And also, it needs to be there to provide rate stabilization. You don't want to have big jumps in your rates from one year to another. More difficult then is, how do you measure what is prudent? How do you measure what is sufficient? And that is really dependable from system to system. So I work with a lot of water and wastewater systems throughout the state, and that there is no 2 system that is alike. Everyone is unique, and everyone needs to figure out what works best for them. But we can use some general guidelines. The Government Finance Officers Association is probably the most followed guideline. And their best practice is start with a baseline of 90 days of operating expenses and then adjust depending on your local circumstances. What I typically see in the industry is having an amount that's equal to the number of months of operating expenses in unrestricted cash. Okay, and usually for a small system, they will go from anywhere from 3 months to 6 months, really depending on what kind of infrastructure they have as part of their system. But I want to emphasize it's in unrestricted cash. You can have restrictions for various different reasons, but this is money you want to be able to access readily. So here's some ideas for considerations for reserves for ALT. I say arguments in favor of a lower than 90-day reserve. Well, you do have very predictable, steady revenue stream, so that certainly lowers the cash flow concern. Some districts don't get their revenue until they receive their property tax monies, and they might have to have a period of time, several months, where they're not having any cash flow. So you're not like that. You don't have any large system assets that might fail and need immediate replacement. And also a consideration is you have a very uniform customer base, so you're not dependent on any 1 or 2 large customers for your revenues. So some places, if something happens to their large customer, then they're really in trouble with their cash flow. Well, how about arguments in favor of having a higher than 90-day reserve? There are unpredictable weather events. So emergency work is sometimes needed. I kind of envision in this area maybe floods, landslides, that kind of thing that could take out some of your wastewater systems and need repair. We also, in California, deal with ever-increasing environmental standards. So what your requirements are under the permit may change over time, and you might want to ensure you are able to deal with those changes. Another consideration is that this fund is an enterprise fund, meaning that all of the revenue it receives is from charges for services. There's no general fund in the district that you can go get an interfund loan from if you get in trouble with that kind of thing. This is a self-sufficient fund. And then I mentioned this, but rate stabilization. So raising rates is unappealing, and particularly with small customer bases, it's not a desirable thing to do. All right, so I'm going to go a little bit into the methodology of the rate study for ALT. It is a 5-year projection of revenue needs, and it starts with the 2019 adopted budget as the base. And then it extends out for 5 years, starting with the next fiscal year, which is fiscal year 19/20. The operating expenses, and everything here has been rounded, all the numbers have been rounded for the presentation. It's about $400,000 a year. So the adopted budget is just, I believe, slightly less than that. And the majority of those costs are for personnel. I think that's unsurprising because a large part of the services that are received for wastewater are personnel going out, doing inspections, ensuring that all of the systems are keeping up to the permit requirements. There are costs associated with the CDS systems. I mentioned system rehabilitation. You want to be collecting money through the rates each month to accumulate for eventual replacement or even just smaller parts that you need to replace in time. There is a small amount of credits in the rate study, so there's a little bit of interest income in there. There's also some escrow fee money in there that gets credited. So in total, the costs are about $385,000 a year, and over the 5-year period, that's projected to increase to about $410,000. Okay, this is the methodology in a nutshell. First of all, those operating expenses are allocated to all of the CDS and the non-CDS lots, both developed and undeveloped. All lots pay for personnel, insurance, regulatory requirement costs, and fees associated with that. The utilities costs are only incurred by the CDS lots because they're the ones that they have that pump station, so there's electricity costs associated with that. That cost only gets allocated to the CDS lots. For the credits, everyone's going to get credits. It's allocated to everybody. And here's the number 5, reserves allocated to all lots to lower the bi-monthly fees. So in doing the rate study, there is a healthy reserve in the ALT fund, and it's not projected that that full reserve amount would need to be kept. So we can apply some of the reserves to lower the bi-monthly fees and still have a prudent reserve at the end of 5 years. So the model puts $180,000 a year toward lowering the bi-monthly fees. And then that revenue requirement gets allocated amongst the lots. Okay. So the key findings are, first of all, that the fees would decrease beginning July 1, 2019, for everyone with the exception of the undeveloped CDS lots. So when I said we did a cost of service study, that's looking at who is paying for the services, is it an equitable cost recovery? There was a shift of costs from non-CDS to CDS lots, and the undeveloped CDS lots actually end up with a fee increase, but everybody else would have a fee decrease. And by the end of the 5 years, the CDS developed lot rate is about the same as it currently is now. This table just shows that very first year of rate changes. So here you see $101 approximately for a CDS developed lot that would then be reduced to $80.47. And you can see there's a reduction for each of them except for that CDS undeveloped lot. Here is a depiction of the projected cash balance. Please remember that this is a projection. Nothing ever happens quite to plan. So I wouldn't expect it to be exactly on the mark here in a year or two's time, but we're doing the best we can with planning. And so you can see the total cash balance there starting out at about 1.1 million. And that then decreases over the 5 years to just a little over 400,000. But about half of that is restricted. So it leaves about $200,000 at the end of 5 years that will be unrestricted. And that is equal to about 6 months of operating expenses. So with this information, and then with your, when we've heard your comments and tonight, the next steps are to write the draft report and take that forward. And then the board will have to make some decisions. And I think these are really the two key ones, aside from actually determining what rates to move forward with, is how much reserve to apply to fees. So there's a recommended use of $180,000 each year, and that draws down that cash balance from about 29 months right now to 6 months over 5 years. Do recommend that that amount be applied to all lots, whether they're CDS or non-CDS. There really is not any historical record to suggest doing it any differently. And then the other key decision would be whether the district should consolidate those 3 funds or keep them separate as they are now. I do say recommend consolidate. This is not a critical decision. If the board wanted to keep 3 separate ones, they could. That is not really critical, but you could do that. But regardless of whether you do or you don't, the CDS lots are paying for system rehabilitation with their rates. So that can always be tracked and kept separate, even if you have all that money in the same fund. Okay? All right, so that is the property-related fees. Now I'm going to move on now to those one-time fees. First of all, there were several fees listed in the fee schedule that the district has that are no longer performed. So that's one thing, is just to remove the ones that aren't actually performed. And then to determine the staff time that is spent on completing each task. So for this, I had significant input from Adam. He's out there, his crews are out there in the field, and they know how long it takes to actually perform these services. So then we applied a cost per hour to the staff time, and that's based on the most recent payroll records that are available. And there is an administrative cost markup of 15% on that. That is a very typical markup that accounts for a lot of the overhead and additional costs of items that are necessary to perform the work. And what this results in is some fees increasing and some decreasing. And we have a slide that shows you the numbers in a moment. And then the CDS connection fee methodology, remember this is only 2 lots that are left that would pay this fee. First of all, determine the net book value of those assets. This is essentially an accounting exercise. And then determine what is those remaining 2 lots' share of the value of those assets and divide it by 2, and that determines the fee. So here you can see the different types of fees, and you can see some of them going up a little, and a couple of them going down a little bit. I think that's what I have, yes. So I'll leave it on that slide, and we could the lights back. So,
so following that presentation, if there's questions, clear anything up, we have some answers.
I have a question. The reason there's a accumulation of,
if you want me to go back to a slide, let me know, I can do that.
we have over $1 million currently, which accrued from overcharges. This just talks about giving back the money over 5 years, which I question why we do that. If someone moves out in 3 months, they're not going to get their refund, right? So what do you know, you're kind of held captive to being here to get your refund back. But I also want to know is, in order to get that reserve or that slush fund you have from the overcharges, this only refers to giving back the money that was already overcharged. There must be some money still additionally being overcharged currently because it still keeps building. So what about the actual cost of service to reduce the amount of the actual cost of getting the work done as a further reduction, so there is no excess continuing to build up on the $1 million you already have?
So from my perspective, there is no excess. What is carried forward in the projection is based on the adopted budget for this fiscal year. That accounts for all the costs, and staff would base that on what their actual costs were last year, what they know that they plan to do in the next year. So I'm taking that number as that is how much it costs for them to operate the system.
I'm taking their word for the fact that, so there is no actual breakdown of cost for inspecting my septic tank once a year, like, what, $20? You know, versus maintenance and the amount of money it costs to maintain those CDS lots, because 90% of us here, we are not on that system.
Right, so I think, the big picture is that there's one permit for this whole system, regardless which kind of lot you have. And the district works to satisfy that permit by having a separate fund, and they have time cards, and they put down their time for all activities that are spent on ALT. Not my job to go through and perform any kind of audit. I am hired to take the district's budget and project and give my recommendations.
And finally, so it's 5 years, does it have to be 5 years? Why can't they just return the money now so people get their money back?
It doesn't have to be 5 years. That's a decision for the board.
Okay.
Can you give the person the microphone so they can
Oh,
hear?
good idea. Yes, good idea. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, yes.
Whereas I recognize that you have come to the conclusions you have based
Can you give him the microphone? Yeah, that's it.
I recognize that you've come to the conclusions you have based on the information you've got. However, first of all, there are 2 separate entities in ALT that, according to law, should not, could not, and shall not be combined. Because the law says that they are only allowed to charge each customer what it costs in their bracket to do the job. So, for instance, if you look at the unrestricted lots, they do not own any equipment, they do not have any reserve requirement other than for the truck and the pencil and the paper that the guy drives around with is battery operated drill and the battery. As opposed to the CDS system, which has all kinds of equipment, all kinds of systems, all kinds of other things. And yet they lump them all together, which basically says that the unrestricted lots subsidize the restricted lots. Therefore, the unrestricted lots are being charged more than the service that they receive, which is in opposition to the law. That's one issue. The other issue is that the $1.2 million that is an overcharge, you are reducing it and saving some of the ill-gotten gains as reserves. It's not reserves, it belongs to the people that paid the overcharge. The third issue that you have is that you are going to pay this over time going forward, which means that everybody that moved in here last Tuesday gets subsidized by everybody that's lived here for 30 years. And that too is wrong. So unfortunately, whereas I understand where you started and where you got, there are issues involving all of this in terms of the overcharge that are not being addressed in any of this. And the way that they are addressing the payback over time conflicts with the law.
All right, so I can't address your second and your third points because, as you say, they're really more legal types of points. The first one I will, because this is a cost of service study. It does allocate costs between the CDS and the non-CDS lots. Some of the costs are allocated based on number of lots, some of them are on payroll records. So there is a best effort to allocate the costs according to which type of customer is causing those costs. Good example being all of the utility costs are going to the CDS customers. So there is a very good effort to allocate as best as possible to each of the customer groups.
And to add to that, there's also more than on the non-CDS lots, there's more than just the yearly inspections. That cost also covers the reporting that we do quarterly, the annual reporting. That's under the one permit that covers the entire Auburn Trail Zone. So that's more than, there's more than just that inspection service we do annually. There's reporting that goes along with that.
Then you really didn't hear what I said. I was talking about reserves.
Right.
There's no need for reserves in unrestricted lots for anything other than the truck, the driver, the drill, the battery, the pencil, and the stick. Okay, I was talking reserves. I understand that the fees are different, and that's exactly my point. The fees are different. The fees are different for CDS. The fees are different from CDS for the non-CDS people. And yet you say, well, no, it's all one big pot because of the geography, and therefore you should all pay the same issue. You know, yes, they pay a little bit more, but you're lumping everything into the same issues and the same reserves, and so all the non-restricted lots, or all the unrestricted lots, are paying a lot of the reserve for something that is of no benefit to them.
Okay, I didn't realize you were referring to reserve. I just in general.
Can't hear you.
Right.
I'm new and to the trails, and I'm sure other people are too. So I know, so when it talks about waste management, wastewater, you're talking about septic.
Correct.
And so so I don't know, other than testing, evaluating the septic system each year, when all these, I figured, $42 a month covers a lot of septic inspections. Because nobody really explained that to me, so I'm not sure what the funds go to every year. And I'm not sure what CDS is versus non-CDS. Sorry about that.
So non-CDS is the majority of the houses in the system that have a septic system on their property. So we inspect annually. A CDS system is there's 137 homes that have a septic tank goes to a collection system that we maintain. It goes to a tuned-up station to a community leach field. So the $40 bi-monthly covers the annual inspection and also the permitting reporting that goes along with that.
The inspections are reported to the state.
Yes, there's state permits called the waste discharge requirements that we comply with, that we have to report to, we have to inspect, we have to maintain the system based on that permit that was issued to us.
So how much is an annual permit then?
Well, there's a cost associated with it. There's also the cost that goes into the reporting that's required out of that, laboratory services that goes into that, and sampling, everything else we do associated with that. So it's kind of, it's obviously time throughout the year, the quarterly sampling every 3 months, the annual report, and then everything else that goes along with that.
So sampling is done every 3 months?
Every 3 months in reports.
Every lot?
So when I say sampling, we're monitoring the groundwater because you have all the wastewater systems that can impact the groundwater. So we monitor groundwater monitoring wells throughout the area. So it's not, we don't go to each lot and sample their actual septic system. We're actually sampling the groundwater, and we're reporting on that.
That makes sense.
Sorry about that.
If I understood, my name is Stephen Crow from Greenwood. If I understood what you said as a presenter, is that you rely totally upon whatever information is given to you by GDPUD, and it's not verified by you in any which way, shape, or form. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have to.
That's not my answer.
I said yes.
Yes. It's not that you have to. You can make recommendations, I believe, to say, I want this information verified so that my facts and figures are accurate, instead of just blindly accepting something that someone in the district or some people in the district hand you, and then you go and do a supposed study not based on verified facts. This is the same thing that happened on the prior 218 for the rate increase, where the district provided numerous documents, but none of it is verified. And I would like to see in the rate study, I presume there's a rate study somewhere, is that correct? Do you know when that might be?
Before, before.
Do you know when that might be?
Either most likely February, March, or
We have not yet discussed the timing with the general manager, what board meeting that would be appropriate to go forward. So I can't give you a date.
Well, it's January already now, and if you plan on getting it done sometime before March, these people are not gonna have the time to research it and to check the veracity of the information. That's my point. And what happened is that happened on the last Prop 218, where the facts and figures were not verified, and yet you're using some of the same methods that GDPUD did on that one, and we have found $30 million difference. And just because you stand there and say, and this is not personal, just because you stand there and say, well, this is the way I would do it, or this is the way I was told to do it, you're not asking these people what their thoughts are. You're stuffing it down their throats, in my opinion. They should have a say on how this district is run, not to have two people stand up in front of them and cram something down their throat. Because this has not been descriptive, in my opinion, as to what I've seen previously. Thank you.
My question is about fire. Fire is a big deal now. Of course, GDPUD is responsible for maintaining our fire hydrants and the fire suppression system on the trails. How does that fit in with your plan?
So that's separate, the water side to this rate study. This is just dealing with the wastewater.
I have a small question about the wells. We take and measure certain things periodically from the wells, correct? Correct. Was the cost of the wells originally, there we go, that's better, thank you. And was the cost of the wells built into this whole project? In other words, all of the separate septics and all of the septic in the large field. Do we have to worry about ever replacing those wells? How much does it cost us to service and make the reports on those? That should be charged back. The way I see it, but I'm only outside here, I don't know about half of this stuff that goes on. But I think that we may have made a good run at determining cost, but I'm not sure that you put all of the costs into the necessary operations.
So we did include replacement of the CDS, now would include wells, because that's part of the whole system, would be the wells.
Okay, so
You're saying you added in the cost of replacing the wells?
In general, you know, it's not, each well will not have a line item for cost of replacing a well, but as a system as a whole. It's part of it, it's part of the system.
So there's $40,000 a year for system replacement of the CDS system. You can use that on any part of that system.
Thank you.
Simple question, the inspection that takes place at Grand
We can't hear back here.
Is that it?
Why is it we never informed of what was found in their septic tanks? I have to call and ask somebody to do the checking on it, and this has been going on for years. It isn't something that's new. So unless I call, I don't even know that somebody's inspected, unless by somebody forgetting to screw the top back on the septic tank, which does happen periodically. But I'd like to know when it's being done and what the results are on the tank.
So we do send out with the month you're scheduled, we do send out flyers.
To say that the
Is-
next 30 days,
yes.
sometime somebody will come.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah, so usually if there's an issue, a problem, we will respond, but if your septic system is working properly, we don't follow up. We only follow up if there is an issue that needs to be corrected.
Well, I think it would be worth certainly your time to give that information out to us. If someone has inspected it, they inspected it, just so we have some idea of what's happening and to stay in touch with what's going on in the trail. Having a look at that, a lot of different places, we don't have to do everything ourselves.
Yes, it's definitely a unique situation.
I've lived here for 30 years, and like this gentleman, I've always wondered if the guys came and looked at my tank, so I put a piece of tape over the screws. It lived there for 9 years.
Pretty strong tape.
So it's nice that nobody gets back to you if everything's just swell. But the truth is, that piece of tape lived on the top of that screw for 9 years. weather finally took it away, I couldn't find it again. Because, so it sounds good, but it's not happening. And there's no checks and balances with the customer. We just have to assume that GDPUD is doing their job. I got a call from GDPUD because I have a fenced front yard with big dogs, and they said they couldn't come in to inspect my tank. And so, please call the office and make an appointment. So I called the office and made an effort to make an appointment, was transferred to whoever does the control for setting up the appointments, got a voicemail, left a message, never heard another word. So, I will tell you that it sounds really nice that GDP is out there doing their annual inspections, but they're not.
Every year for 34 years I lived here.
Thank you. I think it would be a wonderful idea if we could at least know that you were there and what percentage of the tank filled was, whether it's 21% or 23%. Because it gives us an idea that what we're doing is working. And we can either make some changes and make them more, or we can say, okay, we're doing it.
If they can just leave a little card, if they just leave a card.
Sticky note.
Put it on the doorknob, the door hanger.
The pizza guys do.
Yeah.
We do a
That's
door
what my
hanger.
baby last year.
Usually
And
it's
it's the first year I
out.
owned it. Yeah, he was great. These folks
Good.
had issues.
Would like to be notified when we're every year, because it certainly appears to me that at least close to half the people here have no knowledge of anybody ever coming to their homes.
Yeah, so that's kind of, thinking, kind of direction to the board, if that's,
Well, this would be a good time to just ask us to raise our hands.
Yeah.
go ahead, right, I mean,
Well-
it's-
Repeat it.
Ask the question first.
Ask the
Well,
question.
the question is, would you like to have a
Hey, the question is, would you like to have notified of inspection regardless of the outcome? Yes.
How much extra does that cost?
$30 a month.
Right.
Notes are expensive.
That's a monthly, not a bi-monthly.
Not only would I like to know that they were there, I'd like to know how long.
What's that?
Well, you know,
Just gives you an idea what you're paying for.
Microphone.
Well, once they're here, they should go into all kinds of different lots. So, I've been here going on 35 years, and I'm not really familiar with the restricted, unrestricted, and where the fees go, and where all this money is that's in reserve and everything. But I guess now, I'm starting to realize that this money is going to a certain area that may have an issue. And I guess my question would be is, what happens when I live on a single lot, I've lived here 35 years almost, and my field fails? Are those reserves going to be used for my field?
Nor your pumps. Nor your pumps if you have septic pumps.
Why not?
I know both my pumps went out last month. It was a big hit.
But you're combining everything together for the
Get a loan
reserve.
from
That's
the
what
other
I don't understand what's going on.
Not me.
So the reserve, that reserve covers the non-CDS guys like your lot, has your system, which you put in, or you did it, or the person before you. So the reserves cover the infrastructure of the CDS and also the permitting system and inspection. So those actually cover non-CDS lots.
So
Individual
I
systems.
pay a fee to it, but it doesn't cover my lot.
Yes.
So,
Pay it.
you're correct, the reserves is a mixed pot of reserves, right? And it's for these reasons. You wanna make sure you've got sufficient cash flow, pay for emergency and unnecessary repairs. Accumulate for system rehabilitation, that is only CDS. And provide rate stabilization, those are the key reasons to have that reserve. And then it is a district decision. What is prudent, what is sufficient, what I have provided are guidelines, and I've provided a rate study based on those guidelines. If there's input back, we can change things. It's not, we don't necessarily have to do exactly what is said in the rate study, but these are your guidelines.
Referring to getting notice of the inspection, I just got my first door hanger this year. For 10 years I wasn't getting it. It was being sent to the wrong address, and whoever was getting it didn't notify anybody that they were getting my inspection notice. But it is a good thing to know, because since I'm providing not only for CDS reserves, but I'm also covering my own reserves in the form of maintaining a septic tank pumping fee. So it would be helpful to know the percentage in my tank to know whether I'm coming near that, and if it's trending one way or the other. The other lady said, so we could be prepared for our own reserve fund should we need it, that is not being paid for by the CDS customers. So in other words, if we have a repair needed in let alone our pumping fee, but if we have a needed repair in our field, the CDS people aren't chipping in to help that. So I just wanted to emphasize that point. And also, you just brought up something about rate stabilization. What does that have to do with somebody coming out and inspecting my tank once a year for $250? And there's no rates to stabilize. We're maintaining our own reserves. There's no, it's our own, we're covering our own self, we're self-insuring, so there's no rate to stabilize. See what I mean?
I'd like to know what the next step is after this presentation. Is this going to the Finance Committee for review so that all the charts can be looked at and the numbers checked before it goes to the board?
Yeah, I believe that's the plan too. Finance committee and then move forward from there.
To your point, it goes back to my original statement. I understand why you came to the conclusions that you did. But one of the things that I don't think you've taken into consideration is the requirement in the contracting law that says that GDPUD cannot charge me more than the cost of the service of the system. That doesn't give them the leverage to subsidize somebody else's system and charge me for that, because the law is very clear. And so when they lump this all together, when the majority of the cost of reserves, the majority of the cost of activity, the majority of the cost of labor pertains to the CDS system, I will then, in fact, be subsidizing a system for which I gain no benefit. Therefore, it violates the law. So, again, I'm not challenging what you have put up there. That's fine. But it doesn't take into account that there's also this underlying law that has to be adhered to, because that's part of the problem. It'd be like you putting money in the bank, and when they find out that they underpaid you, they give the money back to everybody in the bank. Not a good thing.
Thank you. I'm not that familiar with the 218, but my understanding was that the whole idea was that this whole program was put together for the CDS program, and there's only 2 lots now. I mean, I don't really want to pay $42 a month to have my my system inspected, I can inspect my own system. Is there any way we could separate the two out? Stop the overhead that the other 1,498 lots are incurring and let us maintain our own systems or pay somebody if we want to maintain it and not deal with the CBS system at all, or the state regulations or any of the programs that are being put in place to cover it, you know, and I don't know the law, like I said, but I mean, it just seems reasonable that there's only 2 lots and all this is being put in place just to manage the system for those 2 lots. Why can't we have somebody put a system in place to manage those 2 lots in that system and get the rest of us?
It's just because every lot is under the one permit, that's the problem.
Well, maybe that needs to
We
change.
file our own permits. We're on septic.
There's about 140 lots, but there's 2 lots that are undeveloped still.
Undeveloped, I got you.
Has there been a study? Hello? Has there been a cost of service study done on CDS and non-CDS? And if so, how much does it cost per lot for service?
So what this rate study does, it has a cost of service component in it, and that is allocating the costs amongst the different systems. And that's being done based on payroll records, number of lots, and if this lot receives that service, like the utilities. So it does do that.
You break it
don't
down
see all of
between the
that.
2 per lot, how
Yes.
much it costs?
Yes.
And what is that money?
That's what the rate ends up to be. So you want to go to that slide with the first year rates?
I came in late, I was telling everybody to go over here.
So we did not get into detail of all the calculations tonight, but what you're asking is what is done in the rate study, and that's how the amount is determined for each type of lot.
And you don't have the details?
We can provide the details, we didn't bring them tonight, that's much more minutia.
Well, not the people who are paying for it.
We can certainly provide all of that to you, it's all public record.
All right.
It's all available. Yes.
Okay, so to cut through the acronyms, we're talking golf course lots, correct?
I'm not familiar enough with
That's
what
the
communities.
CDS. Okay, well, nevertheless, the people that are on the golf course are on the system. And when Mr. Miller says he doesn't gain any benefit from it, does anyone use a golf course? I mean, basically they're asking for people who live there to pay for 100% of it, which no one would be able to afford those lots. And it wasn't disclosed to me when I purchased my home, but that's another issue. But I mean, we don't ask the pickleball people to pay for all their improvements, and this is a cost of having a golf course.
No, it isn't. It's wastewater.
It is wastewater. I'm on that system. If you're on the golf course, you're in that system.
But all the ones on American River are also on that system.
Very few, then
Very
few.
few. I'm not down there, but what we call the flatland.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more tied to when they develop the Lake trails, tied to soil type, of how they determine if there was if the lot could support a localized wastewater system or going to a CDS lot.
Right. Now, I have people on my street that are on the golf, that aren't on it, so they have to kind of
Just a comment. I'm Rick Gillespie, and I'm the Finance Committee Chairman. There are some things that when this GDP picked up Auburn Lake Trails, there were some agreements that are in those documents, and I've seen the documents, that required the whole system to pay for everything. And that's the way it was deeded over. I don't know. I was hoping there'd be somebody here that had some of that information, but if they would look into the records when all of the property was deeded over, and they're in some of the closeouts. That was one of the fears. They knew that, going forward, there would be some problems. But so if there's somebody here that's got access to those documents when that change was, you might find the answers in those documents?
Rick, I have them right here. These are the documents from, these are the documents that are dated August of 1984, both of them. It is the information from the Central Regional Water Quality Control Board in the ordinance, and then the resolution that went along with it from the board, where it does assume that GPUD will take over the responsibilities. So if anybody wants to see these, they're welcome to look at my copies.
I have a few questions. The undeveloped CDS lot is an increase, so does that mean that this is going to go through the whole 218 process? The whole rate study?
All of these rates that you see.
Yeah, but
go
one's
through-
increase.
Correct, it
Yeah.
goes with the 218
Okay.
process. They all will,
Okay.
same time.
Wait a minute, whatever. In the budget, it shows that labor has gone up $100,000. Why? From last year to this year. And you're not checking all the tanks, so it's like, where's that going?
So the budget was the same in 2017. You know, that represents the actual. So the budget is a budget.
But there's $100,000 difference in personnel.
So the past, years, it was not necessarily staffed appropriately. So now we're at the staff level that's appropriate to manage the wastewater.
So this $131,000 is one person's salary?
No.
What is it? Your, part of yours?
Part of the inspection, part of mine, part of office staff, part of, the collective.